what I would call the Globalist Empire. And we'll start to address all the chaos that everyone's seeing around us at the moment and how we're sort of turning a corner, I think, towards hope.
Hi everybody, welcome to episode 12 of White Mirror. And this is the part 3 in End of Empires. A very, very interesting episode by all accounts. So I've had a little chat with Simon about this, and yeah, there's going to be some wows when you listen to this one. But anyway, as always, please like and subscribe our channel, share our content to anyone who might be interested. Huge for us, huge for you, because we all need to go into decentralization together, as you're just about to find out. Anyway, Si, how are you?
I'm good, mate. And you're right.
Good.
This is the one I'm most excited about, Dave. It's the finale of the End of Empires series. So, but there's loads in this one. So I'm going to have to go quite quick through it. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. It sounds already very exciting. Let's go.
Okay, so just so everyone knows, we're looking at several things in this episode. We're kind of finishing off what we were talking about in the last couple. So we're going to briefly look at colonial empires, because we need to understand where we've come from and some of the things that have led to the 20th century superpowers.
I love you.
And from there, we'll take a factual trip down the rabbit hole, which will be an interesting one. And you'll like that one, Dave.
Now, why would you say that? I don't understand. Are you kind of insinuating? Are you incinerating something? Some kind of conspiracy. Come on.
Well, this is going to be very, very factual. This is all actual stuff. So we're just going to cover what we definitely know.
All right. Cool.
But
I
really,
like it.
Yeah. What empire are we in now? We're in what I would call the Globalist Empire. And we'll start to address all the chaos that everyone's seeing around us at the moment and how we're sort of turning a corner, I think, towards hope.
Okay. All right. No problem.
So it's a happy one at the end.
No, well, that's always good.
It's got a few bumps.
Happy ending, mate, is always good.
Few bumps in the middle.
So much for my happy ending.
So the last couple of episodes, if you've watched them, and you don't need to have watched them, but if you have, because they kind of all stand alone, but we covered the Sumerian Empire, the Babylonians, we covered the Roman Empire, and also medieval European empires. And all of that history covered 5,000 years, and with each of the empires collapsing again and again due to various types of corruption that we looked at. But like I say, don't worry if you've not watched them. We'll cover a lot in this episode.
Go back and watch them. Please go back and watch them and like them and share them.
Oh,
yes.
Absolutely, if you can, if you want to.
Okay, mate.
But this is the most exciting, though. So let's jump in. Because we're going to fast forward from the age of kings and popes just to the last 500 years, which is a time of empires that are definitely more intense, more corrupt, and more insidious. And I'd say far more dangerous.
Yeah, and you mentioned they're a lot shorter. These empires are very short. They burn out quick. They burn out quick, right?
Yeah, it's like, I think everyone senses this technology, everything, and faster and faster and faster, more intense.
Yeah.
And the empires, they sum it up.
Yeah.
So we are looking at this shorter time period here, actually, Dave. We're going to zoom in slightly, because it's incredible that such a huge amount of change has occurred in such a short period, because we're looking really at about 1500 to 2025. So just over 570 odd years, with most of today's story only happening in the last 75 years. So you're right, Dave. It's just speed. Things have been going boom, faster and faster.
Yeah. Okay.
So let's begin with colonial empires. So it's the 15th century. So for people who don't like history, this is going to be really, really brief, but we do have to have this kind of understanding of where we've come from. 15th century European ships were setting sail into the unknown. Basically, they were chasing gold and spices and glory. And we had relatively tiny kingdoms that started this whole process off, like Portugal and Spain,
Yeah.
who suddenly started mapping the entire world. And honestly, Dave, a ton of the stuff that we've got today that makes up our everyday lives, like our cities, our laws, and the way that we do business, actually has roots in old colonial empires, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah.
It is that way.
Understood.
And
Yeah. Very true.
whilst Portugal was one of the first, the Spanish Empire grew really, really quickly. And back then in the day, if you wanted to pay for something on the other side of the world, of course, you weren't using credit cards. You used the Spanish silver coin, which you've probably heard of pieces of eight, right? Pieces of
Yeah.
eight, pirate speak.
Of course, from the parrots.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That comes from the Spanish currency, which was really one of the first, well, potentially the first global currency, like the Bitcoin of the 1600s.
Yeah.
So they
Wow.
mined,
I like that.
yeah, but indeed, it's probably even more of a real global currency than even the dollar because they were spending it all over the world. Silver was mined in the Americas, stamped royal seal, and they accepted it everywhere. London, all the way around to Beijing, even in Asia, right? So
Yeah.
pretty amazing, really.
Yeah.
But as we just said with the pirate speak, pirates were able to actually cut them because silver's quite a soft metal, right? So you can kind of cut it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were cutting it into pieces. So
Ah,
this is where so if you want to give someone change, you could literally cut it into two bits. And again, the phrase two bits
two
comes,
bits.
yeah.
Right. Right.
So
And
just like,
so pieces of eight. That explains it perfectly. Okay.
yeah, it's something ocho in Spanish. I can't remember my GCSE Spanish is not one.
Piezas de ocho.
That's it. That's it.
Okay.
Forget your Spanish is perfect.
No, it's you try telling my neighbors that.
Tu puta madre.
That is exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is.
All right. Good. Love
And
it. Okay.
well, the colonial empires, they continued to carve up the entire world, drawing borders, building trade routes, spreading language, laws, money all over the world. So this is really 18th to 19th century. A lot's happening.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
as technology was also starting to take off, especially between the 18th and 19th centuries, we're getting like steamships coming in. We've got the telegraph, railways.
I knew you'd get a train in there. I know exactly. I know what sort of person you are. I know exactly.
What are you saying about
anorak. You're an anorak.
Trains are pretty cool, but the world is definitely shrinking at this point in time.
Okay.
And the empires are kind of like starting to bump into each other, and competition is starting to turn into conflict.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shrinking the world.
So, and we kind of now this is getting into more recent history because I guess a lot of people are very familiar with sort of the World War I, World War II period.
I like this period. I like this period of history. I'm very into it. I recently got a recording of my granddad who was explaining in 1982 to a load of school kids what his experience of World War I was.
Wow.
Which shows a bit of my age as well. But yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot of bravery at that time.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
But the two world wars were happening, and the old colonial empires were completely broke, exhausted, and their colonies started to demand independence. And the old order starts to fall apart during this period, especially after the end of the World War II.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got World War One from 1914 to 1918. We've got World War Two, 1939 to 45, and decolonization is beginning
Yeah,
because of this drain on resources and the debt that was accumulated.
yeah. The end of imperial empires kind of has
Right.
started. Yeah,
Yeah, the sun was indeed finally setting on colonial empires,
yeah,
and
yeah,
one colony after another broke free, and the maps started to get ripped up and look like confetti because
yeah,
all the way from India, Africa, Caribbean, all of the independence movements were kind of sweeping around, and
yeah,
so that the world's biggest empires they lost their grip, almost relatively speaking, overnight. What had taken centuries to build up was falling to pieces.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
And in the 1950s, the 60s, most of Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean were sort of gaining their own independence. 1975, Portuguese colonies in Africa, Angola, Mozambique, etc. They were looking for their own independence. I think one of the last ones was 1997, but quite considerably after all the others, and that's Hong Kong,
Hong Kong, of course.
somewhere
Yeah.
that's close to
Have you
our
ever have you
hearts.
ever been there? So have you ever been to Hong Kong, Simon?
You know very well I have, Dave. We've spent a bit of
Okay.
time. I've spent a lot of time in Hong Kong, over 12 years.
It is an interesting place, right?
So, if people had blockchain at this time, which of course the technology wasn't around, but they were having to start to rebuild trust locally, family barter and informal networks. And later, again and again, we'll touch, of course, on how blockchain might have helped all of that process and may help us in the future.
Okay.
So at this point in time, into this chaos after the world wars, stepped two new giants. And it really was because of the world wars that they were able to do so. The United States and the Soviet Union. And they didn't want colonies, they just wanted influence. And I think, the fact that Europe was totally decimated, it allowed some of these things to occur over the 1950s, especially. We had the Cold War, which wasn't about land, it was about control, money, and ideologies, and who got to write the rules basically for the world. And
Yeah.
I think, especially the Cold War, secrecy became very ingrained into the subconscious around this time, and people became a bit more fearful, speculative of secrecy. And again, if we'd had blockchain, perhaps things would have been far more transparent and open. But
Okay.
this is
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
we've always had these tools. So,
Complete paranoia about communism, and
right,
vice versa. Yeah.
that, that's it. Yeah.
Mm.
But we are in the 1950s now, and we move forward slightly. We had Bretton Woods. Now, this is a real pivotal time. So we're really getting into the crux of why our current empire looks as it does. Had Bretton Woods and the dollar's rise from 1944 to 71. Because after World War II, the dollar became the world's reserve currency. And this is the
Mhm.
time that the IMF and the World Bank were being set up to manage
Mhm.
global money and development.
Mhm.
And this is all from meetings that happened in New Hampshire in the USA. And this new world order was starting to take shape, Dave.
As early as that.
Right. And suddenly, I guess this is the thing that whoever controlled the dollar had a say in almost every economy around the world. So this is where things were where globalization was really, the seeds of it were really starting.
Okay. Okay.
Also around this time, we've got kind of like the spread of multinational corporations that, companies were going global, American, European, Japanese companies
Yeah.
setting up factories, of course, supply chains around the world. And we've also got the information revolution, which is happening, television, the rise of television, satellites, and eventually computing and everything, all beginning around these periods. And the fall of the Soviet Union, 1991, left things open pretty much for the USA.
Yeah.
And global institutions like the World Trade Organization were taking a center stage as well. The idea of a global economy became real. But this all carried on for throughout those decades, getting more and more apparent globalization. And by the end of the 20th century, it wasn't just about countries at all anymore, because power had definitely shifted to global institutions, multinational corporations, and financial networks, banking, right? So this is an empire that didn't have a single flag, and most people would say it doesn't exist. But, you know, as we'll come on to in the next few slides, Dave, I think we can challenge the idea that this is not or is a global empire.
Okay.
By the way, actually, also pivotal around this time, our episode on the OGs, or the cypherpunks, because some people could definitely see problems brewing. The
Yeah.
cypherpunks that we have a whole episode, in fact, we have 2 episodes, cypherpunks and cypherpunks to OGs, all about these people that could see the problems and started to look for ways out: peer-to-peer money, open source code, networks that don't care about who you are or where you're from, and
Yeah.
level playing field. They could see it all at this time. And that's what we marveled at in those episodes. But this is the same time period. So check out our Cypherpunk series if you're interested in the rise of Bitcoin.
Yeah. It's just a few episodes back.
So, right, got you to say that. An undertone was forming. The world was more connected than ever, but trust was quietly draining away.
Trust, as he would say, trust. Go on.
I think that people could sense that the game was beginning to get rigged, even from the early 2000s,
Right.
even though they couldn't see the rules. And as the century turned to the early 2000s, power was everywhere and nowhere, hidden, right?
Mm-hmm.
And secrecy continued. And
Uh-huh.
like I mentioned, this really is the time, especially talking about even the late 90s and into early 2000s. But 2008, the resistance had formally started with Bitcoin. Again, that period just after 2008 is the Cypherpunks to OGs episode, which talks about the people who started the networks and were putting so much effort into Bitcoin in the early years.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent.
Ours is not one single empire currently, or is it? Now, I'm going to go down the rabbit hole, but you don't have to go full rabbit hole to listen to some of this and to acknowledge that perhaps secrecy and a lack of accountability are indeed real issues in our global economy. To say that they are not would be extremely naive by anyone's standards, I would think. So let's look at what's fact and what's, I'm not going to say fiction, but harder to prove, shall we? And see how far down the rabbit hole we can go without being realistic.
I'm very interested, Simon, in this.
Because let's be real, there are plenty of powerful groups that meet in private, set agendas, etc. But starting at the top here, mainstream, we know it's all above ground. Up here, it's all kind of like your public governments, the UN, the EU, the things, you can watch debates, you can read minutes and vote, at least in theory, right? At least in theory. And just below ground level, though, if we step down a level, we hit global control rooms. The IMF, World Bank, Bank for International Settlements, the World Trade Organization. There's no elections here. These are unelected bodies, right? But they
corporations. Yeah.
Well, they are bodies, and they shape decisions. They shape economies and lives everywhere. That is undisputable.
Yeah.
I mean, we could just take the IMF, for instance. The IMF steps in when countries are broke, right? The International Monetary Fund. They offer loans, but there's always strings attached. Their help often means strict rules on spending, taxes, and what food can even be imported. They put a lot of very stringent rules on
Yeah.
the conditions of loans. And they certainly apply pressure at the very, very least, right?
Okay.
And we're only just below the surface because we could also take the World Bank here as well, which very similar. They fund big projects, dams, highways, schools in developing countries, which all sounds incredibly lovely, right? But again, the money comes with conditions, right? And
Okay.
critics really do say that it leaves countries with ridiculous amounts of debt, indebted, you know, to
Okay. Yeah.
the larger nations that control
Well,
the
debt is controlled, right? This is how we're
100%.
controlled. We're run on debt. Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're just below the surface, but if we go a little further down, we go deeper, and you find think tanks and policy clubs, right? The Council on Foreign Relations. 100% factual. We are aware of these. They exist, no doubt about it. And you can find a lot about these if you read up yourselves, do your own
Mm-hmm.
research.
Mm-hmm.
Chatham House, Club of Rome. These are exclusive invites, private meetings.
Bilderberg as well.
Hold on a minute.
Ah, ha, ha.
Right, but you're right, Dave. They decide at this level, they decide on what topics are hot and what gets ignored. If a think
Okay.
tank says, for example, that AI is the next big thing, right? Suddenly everyone in government and business is talking about AI. They shape the conversation, they shape the narrative, right? Clever people, apparently, right? But they shape.
People who are educated and go in the same places and go to the same parties. That's what this is. All of
But
it. All of it.
I mean, they talk about AI, for example. That's the example I
Mm,
gave there. But it's not just about. It's not just things like that.
mm,
There's a lot that's discussed that shapes
mm.
policy around the world, and I'm
Yep.
sure I can leave a lot to your own imaginations. Um, but if we go deeper still, now we're in the world of kind of like the ultra elites, World Economic Forum, the Trilateral Commission. And if you're not on the list here, you're not getting in. This is where the world's biggest deals are whispered, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Davos, for example, is the most exclusive networking event for the World Economic Forum. Happens in Switzerland. That's right, isn't it, Dave? Davos, Switzerland.
Yeah, yeah. So that happens in Switzerland every year, every January.
Right. CEOs, presidents, billionaires, that's who's there. And they're swapping business cards and discussing, well, their motto is improving the state of the world, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But for who?
yeah, exactly. There's also Hollywood people, very, very famous people go there that you would be extremely surprised and why they're even involved in any sort of decision making. But yeah, that's another fact,
Right. And
Musicians.
yeah, musician, everybody who's anybody, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you just mentioned it, Dave. I'm going to put this right at the bottom. The Bilderberg is the
I
ultimate
jumped the gun
offer.
a bit. I jumped the gun a bit with them, didn't I?
You're right. You're right. You
Yeah,
know it, and a lot of people do. But what's
yeah,
funny actually about this, right? For decades, the Bilderberg Group was basically a punchline for conspiracy theorists.
yeah,
It was considered a myth or just a wild rumor. And if you
yeah,
if you you were to mention this, right, people would roll their eyes and say you conspiracy theorist,
yeah, yeah,
tinfoil hats, all that. But Bilderberg was real all along. In fact, the group started its meetings in 1954 at
yeah,
the Hotel de Bilderberg in the Netherlands. But for years, there were no official press releases, no public guest lists, no media coverage. Everything was strictly off the record. But funnily enough, in the early 2000s, there was through like a mix of investigative journalists, persistent researchers, and actually a few leaks from attendees as well. It finally forced this Bilderberg group into the open, and they were
out of the shadows.
out of the shadows. But doesn't mean that they publish their meeting minutes these
Most
days
people
or
don't know
anything.
about it, Si. Most people don't know about any of this. Most
Yeah,
people exist in the mainstream and where we didn't actually mention the mainstream media, which is the tool that they use to spread the information.
absolutely. So, yeah, what was once dismissed as conspiracy theory turned out to be correct, strangely enough,
Yeah,
as we've
yeah,
seen again and again and again. But
yeah,
why is it, what, why is this all relevant? Because, the purchasing power of the US dollar has literally halved. Apparently, even according to official statistics, it's halved in purchasing power since the year 2000. That's just the official narrative. But
yeah.
realistically, I think that many people in the US would say that that's actually happened in just the last 5 years. And I think the people in the UK might totally agree with that same
I,
thing
I
as well.
totally, I totally concur with that. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean,
We
I've seen,
they've been telling us fibs about the inflation rates. Absolutely, like wildly, wildly.
yeah. These graphs actually look a lot like our episode on Rome and the debasement of
Yes, very
um,
interesting observation. That.
well, this is the parallel we're drawing anyway, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
this definitely the same story in UK and Europe. Um,
Hmm.
but if we look at government debt, this is kind of like a curve in the opposite direction. Everyone knows about the government debt in the US, but it's not so dissimilar in the UK either or Europe. But US government debt is approaching 38 trillion now, which is funny because every single time I mean, I looked what it is at the moment, while I was researching this episode, Dave, and every time I look at it, the number's gone up by like 2 trillion
Yeah,
because
yeah,
this is an exponential curve. It's like a
yeah.
hockey stick. It's getting faster and faster. Um, but
Okay.
in fact, if you look at this, the most recent $1 trillion was added in just 48 days between July and September. And if you equate that to daily spending, it's 21 billion a day. This is out of control
Yeah, yeah.
by anybody's standards. And I think, everybody acknowledges this really now. And if this is not close to the end, Dave, then I don't know what is.
$38 trillion. Yeah, they've just been printing money, printing and printing and printing, which is a disaster for an economy, right?
Hmm. Well, it was for Rome.
Mm,
We'll
yeah,
see some of these. We'll kind of sum this up at the end.
yeah,
But while currencies all over the world began to implode, like Rome, um, the people can feel something is very wrong. Of course, in Rome, as we discussed, the soldiers could literally see the deterioration of the physical coin. The silver content had been reduced and reduced until this thing that they've got they recognized it wasn't worth what they said it was.
yeah,
And the soldiers in Rome, wanted payment in gold or grain instead. But for today's people, it's far more difficult to detect the destruction of their money because all they see is digital,
mm,
right? In the bank, they can't
yeah,
detect it in the same way.
yeah,
But for some people, they realize they can't both heat their home and eat at the same time. For some people, it's unfortunately a choice. So it's getting very real for many people.
yeah,
And
absolutely. For some years now.
yeah, and now we're really getting on to the chaos in the world that we see. For others, we've got a whole range of grievances, religion versus religion, left versus right, virtuous ideologies. And, sometimes the actions of our own politicians seem to be so counterintuitive, as to perhaps deliberately provoke anger, some might say, as if we are being pitted against one another as a distraction from the main event, Dave, which, as
Uh,
this particular three-part series is talking about, the
that's a
collapse.
that is a huge globalist tactic, what you've just
Hmm.
mentioned.
Hmm. And as things become more chaotic and more anger is clearly present within, what we would consider once normal folk, I think everybody is feeling this. People sense that something isn't fair, but they can't put their finger on it.
Hmm.
And many countries seem to have had almost, funnily enough, the same exact set of issues in lockstep. just within the space of a few years, right? We're all seeing the same things, whether it be Canada, the
Yeah.
UK, Europe, the US, which seems
Essentially the
quite
Western world, isn't it? It's the Western world at the moment that's everything's rolling out, consecutively.
and not to say that Asia doesn't have its own issues as well.
Mm, mm,
There have been protests all over many parts of Asia as well.
mm.
Um, was this the plan all along? You know, so are we living through the collapse, Dave? This is the question. And like many of the empires that we have looked at through this series, like for example in the Sumerian Empire, the elites were extracting far too much from the farmers and the everyday people. We looked at the Babylonian Empire where there was two-tier justice in place and corruption there. Currency debasement, as we've just talked about, like the Roman Empire happening. And in the medieval European empires, we saw corrupt religious leaders and them selling sin licenses and that sort of thing. And of course, colonial, centralized mother countries, centralized control that we, of course, knew when it was transparent back in the colonial days.
Mm.
Did it really go away? But every single empire, this idea of centralized control is the central feature, I would say. We literally check
So
all of the boxes
we're
now.
not in. This is nothing new, is what you're saying. This is absolutely nothing new. Even though we feel like we're in some kind of strange war or some kind of, attack on the people, it is nothing new. Absolutely.
Right.
And so
Um,
we have to look at history.
yeah, so I think the elites know this. Where in prior empires, they maybe had one or two of these root causes. We now literally, as I just say, check all the boxes. And you may have heard of the Great Reset. In fact, the word reset is being mentioned all the time, actually, if you listen at the moment in politics and
You will
finance.
own nothing and you will be happy. I swear, so I own absolutely nothing. And you show me the happiness.
You
I
can do
can't
this
find
with
it.
me, mate. You're happy. We can
Sorry.
do this. It's fun, right?
Oh dear.
Well, the Great Reset, the financial reset, we've heard it all. But the only
Yeah.
question is, what type of reset are they referring to? Do they know? And I'm, I believe we're at a crossroads now, Dave. We can embrace a decentralized future, or we can make the same mistakes of the past. We could allow a small group of figures to control everything, or we can begin to use the blockchain to organize ourselves fairly, transparently, without leaders and without hierarchies. I
Yeah.
personally believe that the only route forwards is our decentralized future. And that's really what this whole White Mirror channel is about, Dave, and is helping people to understand and not be
Yeah.
afraid of this.
Yeah.
Because importantly, Dave, I think a lot of people have started to get a little bit worried about technology as a whole, right? Some people
I
going
think
back
I
to,
think I think that's part of what you were talking about in the last slide, which is pitching people and ideologies against each other. And I think that this is starting to be used by influencers and by mainstream channels in a way to make us fearful of the decentralized future. And I think that's very important what you've just said there.
I think a whole episode is required to make a distinction between centralized use
Yeah,
of technology and decentralized use of technology.
yeah,
We've talked
yeah,
about a lot of people talking about crypto at the moment with fear, and
yeah.
that needs to be addressed. That because people need to understand why decentralized technology
Exactly,
is.
exactly right. And you're right. This is what we're here for. Not only here to kind of, you know, push people over or help people along a little bit, but it's we're also here to clarify that the technology is not as scary as you think. It's not as difficult as you think, you know. And if you go through our episodes and have a look, you know, we cover a number of different subjects showing you how to do, how to use crypto, how to use the blockchain, Web3 as it's going to be called, and how to make money and all sorts of things that can be used on this platform. Whereas what you're saying here at this crossroads, if we go down the route of letting the few control this technology, well, we're going to be in trouble for a while. But
Well,
as history would dictate,
yeah.
they would probably push it too far.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say we've already won.
Okay, I
And
like
that's where this episode from chaos to hope is ending. But we perhaps need to really drill more into why there is so much hope now, and it's wonderful.
Well, and the hope actually comes from the other side. For me, it comes from the other side because you see that the decisions that are being made at the moment, and some of the laws that are coming in, and the censorship, and it's just insane. I mean, it doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever, and that to me points out the fact that there is panic in the ranks. That
Like I
really
say,
does.
we've won, and we will do some more episodes on, the decentralized future and the hope that it brings.
Ty, you know something? I have been sit here rigid throughout these three episodes, absolutely impressed with your historical knowledge. I just didn't know anything because, like I said, I never listened in history. But the way that the parallels from the past and the junction that we're at, it's incredible what you've shown us here, and I'm so grateful.
Thank you, Dave.
As always, White Mirror, as we say, beginning and end, please like and share our content, especially this one. And, we'd really appreciate that. I'm guessing the next episode is going to be a little bit along these lines, something about what we've just been talking about, because it's the word at the moment is all against this kind of technology. But there is a massive difference, like Simon said, between centralized and decentralized technology and futures. So stay tuned in, and thank you very much, Simon.
Thanks, Dave.